My name is Solomon Northup. I'm from upstate New York. I was born a free man there.
ខ្ញុំបាទឈ្មោះប្រមណៈសញ្ជាតិជាខ្មែរដែលរស់នៅក្នុងប្រទេសកម្ពុជា
Me and my wife, we lived in Saratoga Springs.
តើមកគឺថាខ្ញុំខ្វះខាតពីបញ្ហាមូលហេតុលុយកាក់ខ្វះខាតដូចថាប្រពន្ធខ្ញុំទីខ្លងទលេគ្រប់ខែហ្នឹងខ្ញុំចង់ចេញទៅរកស៊ីហ្នឹងមិនគោលងថាទៅប្រទេសថៃទេគឺថាទៅរកនៅត្រឹមជាដែន
I was looking to provide some extra money for my family. The men from Washington, they were a couple of respectable looking gentlemen. They were at the tavern downtown and they said they were looking for somebody to hire to be in their big show.
គឺមានម៉ូតូឌុបមួយបានមកសួរខ្ញុំថាតើបងអូនទៅណាដែរខ្ញុំថាមករកការងារធ្វើហើយរួយម៉ូតូឌុបថាមានតែការងារនៅប្រទេសថៃទេ
So I took the job. And they said they would pay for everything. They pay for my trip, my food, also get to go see the Capitol, which I always wanted to see.
គាត់ថាអត់ថាចង់មកស្មានណាគឺចាំគាត់អ្នកទៅទទួលខ្ញុំថាខ្ញុំដូចអត់សូវជឿ
On June 19, 2012, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton presented an award to 10 individuals from around the world for their outstanding work in the area of combating human trafficking.
I want personally to thank them because they do remind us that one person's commitment and passion, one person's experience and the courage to share that experience with the world can have a huge impact. And I am delighted to welcome all of our TIP heroes here today. Thank you.
These heroes of today are not unlike the heroes of years gone by. In fact, they use many of the same tactics and strategies employed over 150 years ago in America that helped slaves find freedom through a secret network of people and places known as the Underground Railroad. Caretakers and freedom fighters, advocates and defenders, people from all walks of life gave themselves in body and spirit to bring freedom to the enslaved. The anti-trafficking heroes also visited the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center in Cincinnati, Ohio. The Freedom Center exists to tell the stories of freedom from the time of the Underground Railroad on, with the hope of challenging and inspiring all of us to take courageous steps for freedom today in the movement to end human trafficking. History repeats itself, whether we ignore it or not. What you're about to see is the startling similarity between the slave trade that occurred in the early history of the United States and today's human trafficking. Although the institution of slavery has been outlawed, human trafficking continues in the U.S. and around the world. Two men 150 years apart were promised a job and found themselves trafficked into slavery. Each of them have taken care to make their story known. The same methods and maneuvers used to free people like Cambodian man Vanak Proom were used by the Underground Railroad to free men like Solomon Northup from upstate New York. This is the story they told.
We got to Washington, D.C., and it seemed all my new bosses wanted to do was get drunk. They even tried to get me to drink with them. And, I had one or two, but I wasn't about to try to keep up with these gentlemen.
ទៅដល់ម៉ាឡៃហ្នឹងប្រហែលជាម៉ោង 5 ល្ងាចដល់ហ្នឹងគឺមានខ្យល់ចាំទទួលហើយមានចំណាក់ស្រុកជាច្រើនអ្នកហើយចូល30នាក់ជាងទាំងស្រីទាំងប្រុសអង្គុយនៅទីនោះគឺកំពុងតែហូបបាយហូបទឹកហើយរួចខ្ញុំក៏ទៅបាយទឹកជាមួយគេផងដែរ
Sometime later that night it was my head it felt like well I can't explain it but like it was ready to burst
បានទៅដល់កន្លែងឡានគេមកទទួលទៅដល់ហ្នឹងគេអុយនៅគ្នាឡើងឡានដេកទៅមុតដេកកោលើគ្នាដូចថាដេកផ្ទុយគ្នាទៅវិញទៅមកដូចថាដូចជាម្រាមដៃអញ្ចឹងគេរួចហើយគេយកស្បៃខ្មៅស្បៃហ្នឹងវាមានស្បៃខ្មៅអញ្ចឹងវាមានប្រហោងផងវាយកគេគ្របទៅលើការពារកុំអុយប៉ូលីសឃើញមកទៅអស់គ្នាមានការភឹកភ័យ
I don't remember much. Several people came into my room. I blacked out. When I finally came to, I was alone and in darkness, and I had chains around my wrists and ankles.
ក៏គេយកពួកខ្ញុំនឹងទៅដាក់នៅក្នុងផ្ទះថ្មចាស់មួយបាក់បែក
I was finally able to get my bearings when they opened the door. It was a slave pen, pure and simple.
ប៉ុន្តែវាអត់មានប្រហោងទេមានតែមួយតាមប្រហោងព្រិល
There was a yard in front of the door. It was like a farmer's barnyard. And it had high walls. So it was not to see that there were people inside instead of animals. I was able to look up over those walls one time. And you know what I saw? Capital. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And a slave pen just down the street.
រួយគេចាក់សោយពីក្រៅផ្ទះនឹងនៅជាប់នឹងមាត់សមុទ្របងមួយខ្ញុំមើលឃើញទៅឃើញសិតតែទូទាំងខ្ញុំដឹងថាខ្ញុំប្រកាសជាគេលក់ចុះទូ
It was some man I had never seen before. And I had demanded, I said, why was I in jail? And he said that I was his slave and he had bought me. And, well, I said I was a free man. And that just made him see red. And he stripped me of my clothes and he beat me. And I kept telling him, I said that I was a free man, that this was all a mistake. And he said I was a liar and that I was a runaway from Georgia. And he kept beating me. And he claimed that if I even dreamed that I was free, that he would kill me.
ខ្ញុំចង់រត់ចង់មកបួកពួកនឹងរត់ដែរប៉ុន្តែខ្លះមិនហ៊ានឬគេថាតែគេរត់បានគេរត់ទៅអាខ្លាចគេដូចថាគេបាញ់យើង
They took me and several others in the middle of the night to a steamboat. They placed us below the freight. Wasn't no room down there for us, but we made do. We had no idea where they were taking us.
Slaves like Mr. Northup had no control over where they would end up. For slaves who were looking for a chance to escape, their greatest fear was to be taken into the Deep South, further and further from their families. On the border of a slave state, with only a river separating free men and women from bondage, the city of Cincinnati was uniquely positioned in the fight over slavery. Its community of abolitionists played a remarkable role in the eventual abolishment of slavery. Cincinnati was a hub of innovation for abolition, an incubator for freeing slaves. This community was made up of people from all stripes and walks of life, from wealthy businessmen and lawyers to runaway slaves and free African Americans who were the hands and feet, eyes and ears of the engine of freedom. One of these men, named John Parker, who had purchased his own freedom at the age of 18, was one of the most courageous conductors of the Underground Railroad. Exactly the kind of man who could have assisted Solomon Northup. Mr. Parker speculated that over 400 runaway slaves had gone through the station of his home down the river. He was a one-man seek and rescue operation, unafraid to venture into the Deep South to help people escape with little regard for his own life.
We rescue victims of violent abuse and oppression in the developing world and make sure that they are restored to the kind of place that they were meant to be. Then to make sure that we bring the perpetrators of abuse to account.
Gary Haugen and the International Justice Mission go into the deepest and darkest places, often impersonating clients or business owners who are looking for the services of those who have been trafficked. They not only free victims, but bring the criminals involved to justice.
There were some communities that they had no voice at all, that they had no power that was being brought to bear on their behalf. They couldn't access power. If I were a slave, if someone were holding me in a place of just horrific abuse, what would I want someone to do? I would want someone to come and be a voice for me. I'd want someone to bring to bear what they had on my behalf. If you're willing to go to the most desperate place, whatever you bring to bear is going to have a disproportionately dramatic impact.
Lang ban ke yok ao kho thua ka no le kapal ke nom to lang tu ta kapal ke samrap to yo tre pi kanda samot yo moประเทศไทยពេលបើសិនគេឲ្យដើរមកក្រោយខ្ញុំនឹងនាំគ្នាលុបតម្លាក់ទឹកបើគេអត់ឲ្យដើរចេញមកឲ្យនាំដេកបានទៅដល់ពាក្យកណ្ដាលសមុទ្របានក៏ឲ្យដើរធម្មតាអង្គុយលេងអីធម្មតា
They chained us all together. We were able to learn each other's stories. I was handcuffed to a man named Robert, who was also born free. And he had children, a wife, back in Cincinnati. Robert and I, we became friends right quick.
មានជនជាតិភូមិដែលខ្មែរសរិនម្នាក់ដែលគាត់ចំណាស់ប្រហែលជាអាយុជិតចូល50រួចហើយគាត់ក៏ដើរចោះដើរលើក៏គាត់លូតទម្លាក់ទឹកកប៉ាល់ក៏វិលត្រឡប់មកវិញមកយកអ្នកលូតទម្លាក់ទឹកហ្នឹងយកគាត់ជាជនជាតិខ្មែរសរិនឡើងមកលើទូកហើយក៏ប៉ុន្តែហ្នឹងគាត់អត់មានតន់ស្លាប់ទេដូចថាគាត់ថាផឹកទឹកឆ្អែតអីចឹងប៉ុន្តែតកែនឹងឲ្យបោះទម្លាក់ទឹកទៅវិញ
We discussed all the possibilities of trying to escape. Came up with a mighty good plan too. Just the hope of it was keeping me sharp. And Robert, he was taken ill. Died a few days later. Then I watched him throw Robert's body overboard the ship.
The life of a slave was valued at next to nothing. It didn't take much for a slave trader to get rid of his excess human cargo. Today is no different. The average trafficked victim is bought and sold for as little as $200.
I cannot believe a human person can do to another human person without any pity, only to think about your money. I have seen hundreds of them, not 200 years ago. Now they are tortured, and you can see on their back, on their hands, on everywhere.
Sister Aziza discovered victims of human trafficking in her work as a nurse. She shifted her focus and life's work to care for rescued victims from this insidious trade.
They are taken to a warehouse, and there they are chained, very little water in that heat of desert. The women are also tortured, not as a man, but sexual torture.
150 years earlier, another woman named Catherine Coffin, known as Aunt Katie, was also heavily involved in the care of freedom-seeking slaves, along with her husband Levi. Aunt Katie hid fugitives in the basement and in the attic of their home and reportedly directed runaways through a series of underground tunnels connected to other buildings as routes for quick escape. She established a sewing circle to provide clothing for those headed north, caring for the whole person, body and soul. Aunt Katie spearheaded the efforts to care for the runaway slaves coming through Cincinnati, making sure they were ready for their journey further into freedom.
They get so much scared. They don't trust anymore. So as soon as they open their heart, they trust you and they want to tell you more. You need to listen, to give them time, to treat them as a person, to treat them as humans. And that's all.
Robert's death was hard. We were friends. I found myself just staring off into space. One of the sailors, he asked me why I was downcast. And I had told him, I said, well, I've been kidnapped and I was desperately trying to get word to my family. And he got me some paper and a pen, and I was able to write my letter. And I remember I watched him leap on the shore. First man off the boat at port to post my letter. And I remember he looked at me with the knowing look. I finally had reason to hope again.
ខ្ញុំនៅលើទូកអស់រយៈពេល3ឆ្នាំជាងធ្វើការនៅលើទូកវិសានឹង3ឆ្នាំជាងព្រោះហើយខ្ញុំក៏ថ្ងៃមួយដែលទូកនឹងអស់ប៉ាសពតអស់ដែលការបងពុនទូកនឹងទៅបងពុនដល់ពេលអញ្ចឹងគេទៅមិនតាន់បានចតទៅដល់ច្រាំងបើយម៉ោង12យប់ខ្ញុំលូតទម្លាក់ទឹកហើយមានកដងទឹកត្រីកដងទឹកត្រីនឹងវាបើគិតទៅវាចំណុះវា30លីត្រកដងមួយនឹងហើយខ្ញុំចាក់ទឹកត្រីចោលម្នាក់មួយអញ្ចឹងក៏យកកដងលូតទម្លាក់ទឹកហែលមករកកោះព្រោះខ្ញុំក៏រត់ទៅរកនៅថារត់ទៅរកដល់ប៉ូលីស
Mr. Proom hoped the police would help him find his way home. Unfortunately, law enforcement isn't always ready or able to assist.
Donc 24 heures sur 24, je suis à la police des mineurs. Et c'est à travers l'explication de l'enfant et quand on découvre les parents qu'on se rend compte que c'est une famille esclave.
Fatimata risks her own freedom on a regular basis. She has been arrested many times and even imprisoned for her actions. But she doesn't back down in the face of danger.
Deuxièmement, nos téléphones sont sur écoute, donc on est écouté 24 heures sur 24. Nos mails sont déjà interceptés parce que nous disons la réalité telle que ça se passe. Parce que pour moi, je pense que c'est le seul endroit et c'est le métier qui me permet de défendre les personnes qui n'ont pas la possibilité de se défendre.
Another daring abolitionist, William Casey, an African-American operator of the Underground Railroad, had the reputation for such wisdom that other established abolitionists would seek out his advice and strategy. Like Fatimata, he willingly risked his own safety by entering into slave territory to help slaves escape.
J'ai une équipe que nous avons surnommée les éperviers. Et au début, nous avons commencé les activités d'aide aux enfants dans la colère de la manière dont nous voyons la souffrance des enfants. 3 jours avant mon arrivée ici, j'ai été arrêté pour 2 heures du temps pour le fait que j'ai eu à retirer un garçon victime de traite auprès d'un multimillionnaire béninois. Parce qu'il ne voyez pas les trafiquants comme les gens comme moi et vous. C'est les gens qui sont loin, qui collaborent même avec les gens qui sont au sommet. C'est tout le monde ici et partout dans le monde. S'il y a quelqu'un qui s'attaque à ton intérêt, tu ne vas jamais penser bien de ce dernier. Tu vas toujours chercher à le détruire. Et ne jamais arrêter de protéger les militants en cas où ils se retrouvent en danger. Surtout le point essentiel.
I was hoping beyond reason that somehow my letter would work to set me free. Slave traders came on our boat to receive their human shipments. Some man came and took me and several others back to the slave pen, where we were required to wash ourselves thoroughly. There was customers who came and they checked our hands and our arms and our bodies and examined our teeth like a jockey who's looking at a horse he's about to purchase. And several of us were bought by a man known as William Ford. And I was known as Platt. That's the name they gave me down at the slave pen.
Man thật đo lấy police ấy có điểm thà nhom nhom chơi Anh mà thà nhom from Cambodia I go back go home nang đầu về những police Malaysia cái việc bà nhom nực thế hay nực bọn anh côn bao nhom đôi thà mình đang ta côn say đang côn pro chứ á. Có một tay phải chỉ mùi mong có một bàn miền bồ rong mà nhẹ có chỉ chút Malaysia đây bên đây một lần plane nó có vô nhung tàu.
Well, we had left the steamboat about 25 miles back downriver, and the slaves were walking alongside the wagon, and they walked the 25 miles back to Mr. Ford's plantation.
Ta đo việc đào pháo nước miền chôn chết China mà vô nhung. Phải có bạn hỏi lui nâng oi để bồ rọc vô trong tranh vì lên bì màu. Với nhung có kết thang nhung đừng tranh bộ kỳ, vì nhung đừng tranh bộ kỳ vô nhung tự lộ nhung đừng ta vì hỏi lui oi muốn buông lên. Có bạn vô nhung tập vật vô tàu to tiệt to tại đó và chỉ mong buốt mong bay có miền Lan chôn chết China mà giết trăm là tôi luôn việc đào pháo kỳ hỏi lui oi buồn để vô nhung tàu to để vì cái lên để nãy vô trong bị cái lệnh bị lì nè cái gọi ban đặng trong đó trong cả đồ prênh.
Mr. Ford, he owned a lumbering establishment 4 miles away. Nicest slave owner I'd ever met. He made me an apprentice to a carpenter he had hired. One morning, this carpenter came to where I was hard at work, having in his mind that he was going to start something between us. Now, I had done everything he had asked me. He took out his whip and he asked me to strip. I held my ground and I said no. Well, he jumped on me, grabbed my neck, and he tried to hit me. Well, I caught his arm. Then I wrestled him to the ground. My blood was boiling and I put my foot on his neck and I grabbed his whip and I got to beating him. And he was screaming in pain until I finally caught myself and I realized what I was doing, and then I dropped the whip and I got to running. I ran towards the swamp and I could hear the howls of the dogs getting closer, closer, closer. And And I kept running until I reached the water where I thought I was safe, until I looked out and I saw hundreds of snakes and alligators and wild pigs and, well, honestly, I didn't know what to be more afraid of. The creatures in the swamp, the howls of the dog, or the man chasing me. Finally, I ran all the way back to Mr. Ford's house, and you know, he had never lifted a hand at me. He never, and honestly, I had nowhere to go. I desperately wanted to stay with Mr. Ford and live on his plantation, but he found that I was of use to him, rented out to others. So he lent my services to another cruel man who I worked with and toiled in his cotton fields for years. There wasn't a day that went by where I didn't plan or dream of escaping.
Slaves who dreamed of freedom needed more than a plan. They needed a place to go. One place was a home just across the Ohio River in the town of Ripley, Ohio. A home whose lantern-lit windows could be seen from the slave state of Kentucky. That safe place was the home of Reverend John Rankin.
We have created a home. It's a shelter focused on sex trafficking, and so we're dealing with high level of trauma and the immediate crisis situation that person comes out with. Usually you get that phone call at 4 in the morning on a Friday or something like that, at a time where you least expect it or you never know. And so here's this person that suddenly needs your help, and you have to provide that care.
Like Reverend Rankin, Phil has created a safe place, a refuge for those in need.
It was the first person we got to help, and this person was sent from another city. She would not refer to me as a man, and they were asking her why. Well, she's like, no, Phil is not a man, he's something else, because for her, she had never had a man in her life that was not abusive. But we want to provide a place where they can, be free and can decide what they want their hair to look like or whatnot. And it's amazing what those things actually do to a person, just the simple things.
Mr. Prume and the other slaves got a hold of some beer one evening. They decided to have a party and celebrate that though they were still slaves, at least they weren't on the fishing boats anymore. But things got out of hand and a fight broke out.
Stop, chop. ผมមាននឹងកាប់ធារានឹងមួយកំបិតត្រកក្បាលហើយនឹងចិត្តលឹកជាចិត្តដៃលឹកជាខ្ញុំរត់ទៅ3ភូមិមាសកាប់ខ្ញុំកំបិតទៀតចំអញ្ចឹងក៏ពេលហ្នឹងខ្ញុំក៏បានមានថៃហ្នឹងក៏បានមកកាប់ជនជាតិភូមិមាសហ្នឹងក៏ខ្ញុំបាន3ធារាមកទៅ
Mr. Prume was taken to a hospital by police where he was treated for his knife wounds. He was able to get his hands on a cell phone there and for the first time contact officials in Cambodia.
បានរយៈពេលប្រហែលជា10ថ្ងៃបានមានជនជាតិគាត់ជាជនជាតិអាល្លឺម៉ង់គាត់ឈ្មោះហៃណាំងម៉ាន់ហ្វ្រេតហើយគាត់ធ្វើការនៅអង្គការលីកាដូគាត់បានទៅជួបខ្ញុំនៅស្រុកមូកាហ្នឹងគាត់ទៅធ្វើកំណត់ហេតុពីបញ្ហាជាមួយប៉ូលីសហ្នឹងគាត់ធ្វើការរួចរាល់អស់ហើយគាត់និយាយមួយខ្ញុំថាមិនយូរទេយើងនឹងបានវិលត្រឡប់ទៅប្រទេសខ្មែរវិញប៉ុន្តែវាមិនតាន់បានភ្លាមទេពីព្រោះច្បាប់គេមិនអាចធ្វើម្លងនឹងច្បាប់ណាមួយបានទេអញ្ចឹងមកខ្ញុំភ័យ
My master had hired a crew of carpenters to work on his house. One of the men, named was Saul Bass, had his own opinions all the time. He would talk about how slavery was wrong, and my master and the others just laughed at him. So after working alongside Mr. Bass for a few months, I finally got the courage to just tell him about my story. And he told me that my secret was safe with him. And then he said that we was to be friends for life, and I said, Mr. Bass, can you write a letter for me? And he said yes. He would devote his life to making sure I was free again. I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Like Saul Bass, Harriet Beecher Stowe used her writing to set people free. Instead of a letter, she wrote a novel called Uncle Tom's Cabin that drew an authentic portrait of the life of a slave, impacting millions of people. Her book was a worldwide bestseller and reset the world's understanding of slavery in America.
To get law enforcement on your side in relation to trafficking really means changing their views on what a victim is, changing their views on the role that they have to very marginalised groups. I work a lot with law enforcement, with police and with prosecutorial and judicial agencies. And we've been now working with prosecutors to make sure that the work of these law enforcement bodies is dealt with appropriately up the criminal justice chain and actually results in prosecutions.
Like Mrs. Stowe, Anne has an instrumental role in bringing a true understanding of human trafficking to the world.
And this is a change in mindset that I think is happening in Southeast Asia and in many other countries, but it's going against a long tradition of thinking the other way. So we're not there yet.
Another key player in the global community fighting human trafficking is Maria Grazia Giamarinaro. Maria started out wanting to be a judge after seeing corruption firsthand in her own neighborhood. Her worldview grew, as did her role, and she found herself in the midst of a new challenge.
I wanted to understand, and I started to go with the street units, with the NGOs working with prostitutes, 12 prostitutes. And suddenly, when you realize what it's about, at least in my case, I decided this cannot be.
Like Harriet Beecher Stowe, Maria speaks to power all over the world to give a true picture of human trafficking.
I have direct access to governments and can discuss with the ministers in charge of anti-trafficking policy. We have to promote innovative interpretation of the law. We have to make these tools work on a much larger scale.
Well, Mr. Bass sent the letter, and he said that we should hear something after 4 weeks. Well, 10 weeks passed, and I didn't hear a word. I lost hope again.
The police took Mr. Prum from the hospital to his arraignment, where he was coached by the authorities to lie to the judge. They told him he'd go home sooner if he confessed to being an illegal immigrant. Instead of telling the truth, he complied. The judge sentenced him to 3 months in jail for being an illegal immigrant. Mr. Prum was moved all over, jailed in 5 different institutions for more than 7 months, making his sentence even longer than the judge required.
A Monday morning, we were out in the fields. I remember I saw a carriage, and the sheriff got out, and he pointed to the carriage, and he asked me if I knew the man that was in there. It was a man from my hometown, a lawyer, and he had come all the way from my hometown to free me. Seeing Mr. Bass's letter had finally reached its destination. The sheriff asked me things to prove to him that I was telling the truth. And he looked at me and he said, "Go ahead and throw down that sack. Your cotton picking days are over."
One of the lawyers who helped Solomon Northup secure his freedom and prosecute the men who enslaved him was Salmon P. Chase, a well-known politician from Ohio. Mr. Chase was one of several law enforcement officials who found creative ways to challenge the institution of slavery based on existing laws.
This type of crime, you have to change your mind so as to to judge it well, to be a good judge, to be a good prosecutor, because if you are not willing to do that, you are going to miss the most important point, that is the victim, the life of a victim, and the believing of that victim. We have to make their voices louder, because you are acting on behalf of these poor people, these victims who are not represented at all in the judicial system.
Like Marcelo, Salmon Chase became a voice for the most vulnerable. In fact, he built his entire law practice around freeing slaves and fighting slavery as an institution. As it did then, law enforcement plays a crucial role in fighting human trafficking today.
The biggest challenge was to get out of my chair and take off my police hat and look at it as helping people, you know, be more sociable, because a police officer is, you have the law, you have somebody that breaks the law, you lock them up, you convict them. It's very simple, actually. What I learned for myself was that in between there's a lot of things that happen. You know, you cannot look at it as only a police officer. You have to look at it as somebody like a social worker. This is an area you need to be passionate about. If it's something you just do, because if it's part of your work, you will not make it.
Like Jeanette, Salmon Chase dedicated his life with abandon to the abolitionist movement. He found himself deeply entrenched in every aspect of the cause, participating in ways far beyond his conventional role with the law.
It had only been 3 short weeks since I was free when I arrived home. And a day later, I took the trip to where Ann and the children were staying. Margaret, my eldest, was the first to see me. She didn't even recognize me. She was only a small child when I last saw her. And now she had a boy with her, her boy, little Solomon, who she named after her not forgotten father. And Elizabeth, my angel. And Ann, they came to me as I ran to them. And we hugged and we laughed and we cried in disbelief that we were seeing each other again.
Đó là cái đối thái dương tự lo cái bậc cậy thà cái mình vô mình ấy chẳng nè. Vì pro dương bảy cái chuyện năm năm mũi đối thà cái thái dương tụi mình stray mình tham mây na đây chẳng. Đó vì bạn ông ca khang ly cái đồ cái tàu tiện tàu cái này đăng tới ban đăng thái nhóm chọc cũng nằm lề mền. Côn bong để nhóm tranh tàu là côn bong để tận tận cỡ đó. Rồi bạn cỡ mà hỏi ban đời vì dụ của mua năm chia thôi.
My family hadn't forgot about me. As alone as I felt, I wasn't alone at all. Ever since that first boat, when that sailor took an interest in my sadness, his letter had reached them. They just knew nothing on how to find me.
Cú nung sống ngay nhưng cú đâm bay thà sải rớt bao nhiêu cú hay có bận mét sải nung rớt bao nhiêu thà trong oi nghĩa sọc nửa tít ngay nhưng rư cờ tít ở tây địa bản đắng á nhưng trong sọc sai.
So I finally sat down, once and for all, what had happened to me. A local publisher even thought my 12 years as a slave was worth telling as a story. My hope, my eternal hope, is that anyone in the North who reads my story, anyone at all, gets a true picture of the evil nature of slavery.
Nhưng miếng cầm đất ấy, ở đây cầm đất trong chui, mình chả soกับbận mất ở cái ảnh ở yên thôi đi thứ nó khang phải vô chứ nhưng ảnh thôi bàn chui của nhom trong chui mong tụi tao phục lội bàn cái hai tim mũi trong oi nhẹ rút con một nó bàn đừng thà sọc ngay cái pung tập duyệt bị chăng bằng cạp đà hang chui đô vì một
It took a community of people from all walks of life to end the institution of slavery in the United States. Even more so today, a global community is required to conquer what is perhaps the most important human rights crisis of our time. A fight like this requires something from all of us, bringing what we have to the table. Artists, lawyers, police officers, business people, and consumers can make a lasting impact. People working as individuals in a network that functions for freedom. 150 years after President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation can be a new beginning, a fresh start of an abolitionist movement that will, once and for all, put an end to human trafficking as we know it and bring freedom to the world. Looking back into history, we see heroes. But heroes are just ordinary people taking a courageous step in a single moment in time. History is made by people like you and me. Together, we can make slavery history.